Welcome to the Alpha Mediumship Academy podcast, a space for intuition, mediumship, and spiritual growth. I'm Joy L, and each week we explore conscious development, awareness, and the deeper side of spiritual experience. So, wherever you are, settle in and let's begin. Welcome back. Today's episode is called What Spiritual Development Actually Looks Like in Real Life. And I want to start by saying something very directly, because it might challenge the version of spirituality you've been exposed to. Most of what people think spiritual development is not real. Or more accurately, it's not complete. There's this idea floating around that spiritual growth looks like constant peace, constant intuition, constant clarity, no emotional disruption, and becoming this calm, unbothered, almost untouchable person. But that version is a fantasy. And not only is it a fantasy, it can actually make people feel like they're falling when they're doing exactly the right thing. Because real spiritual development doesn't remove you from being human. It makes you more in it, more sensitive, more aware, more honest, sometimes more comfortable. And the truth is, you don't become less triggered. You become more aware that you are triggered. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through what spiritual development actually looks like in daily life. Not theory, not aesthetic spirituality, real life, real emotions, real behavior. Let's go in. One of the first misunderstandings about spiritual growth is this idea that you stop reacting, that you become so evolved that nothing bothers you anymore. But what actually happens is very different. You don't stop having emotional reactions, you start noticing them sooner. Let me explain. Before spiritual development, something happens and you react automatically. Someone says something that feels dismissive, and you either get defensive, shut down, people please, over explain, or pretend it didn't hurt. There's no gap. Stimulus, right to reaction. But as you grow, something subtle changes. There's a gap. And in that gap, you start to notice, oh, I felt that. Not after the fact, in real time. You feel the tightening in your chest. You feel the shift in your tone. You feel the urge to protect yourself. And instead of immediately reacting, there's a moment of awareness. And that moment is everything, because spiritual development isn't the absence of reaction. It's the presence of awareness inside the reaction. And that changes everything that comes after. This part is where things often get uncomfortable for people, because spiritual growth starts to affect your relationships, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. You begin noticing how often you've been abandoning yourself just to keep things smooth. You might notice things like saying yes when you mean no, laughing at things that don't feel funny, agreeing when you actually disagree, staying quiet to avoid tension, over-explaining to be understood, over-giving to feel valued, and once you see it, you can't fully unsee it. And then something starts to shift. You begin making slightly different choices, not extreme ones, small ones. I need to think about that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. I actually feel differently about this. And here's the important part. You don't always feel confident when you say it. Sometimes you feel shaky. Sometimes you feel guilty. Sometimes you feel selfish. But you say it anyway. And this is where spiritual development becomes real. Because it's not about being fearless. It's about being honest while still feeling fear. And over time, something very important happens. You start trusting yourself more than you trust approval. A lot of people expect intuition to feel like a loud voice or a strong certainty. But in real spiritual development, it doesn't start that way. At first, intuition often feels like confusion, uncertainty, second guessing, silence, or emotional noise. Because what's actually happening is you are detoxing from external authority. You used to rely on other people's opinions, cultural conditioning, fear-based decision making, logic only, approval signals. So when you start shifting inward, those old systems stop feeling reliable. And your inner voice isn't fully developed yet. So instead of clarity, you get space. And that space can feel uncomfortable because we're not used to not knowing. But spiritual development looks like this stage. I don't fully know yet, but I'm not abandoning myself to decide quickly. This is intuition being rebuilt, not as certainty, but as self-trust in uncertainty. And over time, clarity returns, but from a different place, not external validation, internal recognition. At a certain point, spiritual development stops being about insight and starts being about regulation. Meaning, what do you actually do when you feel emotionally activated? Not in theory, in real time. Let's say you feel jealousy. Before growth, you might suppress it, act out, shame yourself, compare yourself more, or pretend you're above it. But with more awareness, something else becomes possible. You notice it. You feel it in your body. You name it internally. This is jealousy. And instead of immediately reacting from it, you stay present with it, not to fix it instantly, but to understand it. What is this pointing to? What is this protecting? What is this trying to show me? And this is where emotional maturity develops, not from never feeling things, but from not abandoning yourself when you do. This is the real spiritual skill, staying inside your emotional experience without collapsing into it or escaping it. Another major part of spiritual development is identity shift, and this can feel disorienting because identity gives us structure. It tells us who we are, how we behave, what we believe, what we're consistent with. But as you grow, you start noticing something strange. You don't fully resonate with your old self anymore. Things you used to say confidently feel different now. Roles you used to play feel tight. Even beliefs you used to hold strongly start softening. And this can feel like instability, but it's actually flexibility. You're moving from a fixed identity to a more fluid one, where instead of, this is who I am, it becomes, This is what feels true right now. And that is actually more mature. Even though it feels less certain, because real growth doesn't always give you a stronger identity, sometimes it dissolves rigid ones. This is a big one. At some point in spiritual development, you stop needing someone else to define your experience for you. You might still learn from teachers, mentors, systems, or frameworks, but something changes internally. You stop asking, what does this mean? Am I doing this right? Is this aligned or not? And instead, you begin developing your own inner discernment. You start noticing, I can feel this for myself, even if you're not always certain, even if you're still learning, even if you sometimes get it wrong. This is a huge turning point because spiritual development is not just about awareness. It's about sovereignty, not outsourcing your inner truth to external authority, but learning how to stay with your own experience long enough to understand it. And here's something important that often surprises people. Real spiritual development does not look dramatic from the outside. It does not always look like transformation or awakening or visible change. Most of the time, it looks like going to work, having uncomfortable conversations, pausing before reacting, crying privately and still functioning, setting one boundary at a time, noticing patterns sooner, choosing differently in small moments. It looks ordinary, but internally, it is profound because it's not about changing your life overnight. It's about changing how you move through your life, moment by moment. So let's bring this all together. Spiritual development is not becoming perfect, becoming calm all the time, becoming detached, or never struggling. Spiritual development is becoming more aware inside your experience, more honest with yourself, more willing to feel, more aligned in small choices, and more responsible for your inner world. It's not dramatic, it's cumulative. It's built in repetition, in awareness, in small moments of honesty. And over time, it changes everything. Not all at once, but deeply and permanently. All right, I want to bring this episode to a close by grounding everything we talked about today. Because if there's one thing I really want you to take from this conversation, it's this. Spiritual development is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more aware of who you already are without abandoning yourself in the process. It's not about removing your emotions. It's about learning how to stay with them. It's not about never getting triggered. It's about noticing when you are. It's not about perfect intuition or constant clarity. It's about building self-trust, even when clarity isn't fully there yet. And most importantly, it's not about changing your life overnight. It's about changing the way you show up inside your life, moment by moment, choice by choice, interaction by interaction. That is what actually creates transformation, not intensity. Consistency of awareness. And if you're listening to this and realizing that your version of spiritual development has felt confusing, overwhelming, or inconsistent at times, that's actually more normal than you think. Because most people are trying to live a spiritual path. They were never actually shown how to integrate into real life. That's exactly why Alpha Academy exists. To bring spirituality out of abstraction and into embodiment, into real decision-making, real emotional awareness, real self-trust. So if this episode resonated with you, I want you to take one thing with you today. You are not behind. You are becoming aware, and awareness is the beginning of everything. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for being here with me today. If this resonated with you, you can continue your development through Alpha Mediumship Academy using the link in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And just remember, you're probably perceiving more clearly than you think. You're just learning how to trust it. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and trust yourself a little more than you did yesterday.